Saint Thérèse of Lisieux explained what Jesus asks from souls who long for eternity. Have you ever wondered what Jesus truly asks of a soul that longs for eternity? Have you felt a deep desire for heaven, yet questioned whether you are doing enough, becoming enough, or offering enough? And have you sensed quietly that what God asks might be far simpler and far deeper than you were taught to believe? There is a gentle answer to these questions, and it comes not from theology books filled with complexity, but from the heart of a young Carmelite who understood eternity through love. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux spent her life discovering what Jesus truly desires from souls who long to live forever with him. Jesus does not ask the soul to climb toward eternity. He asks the soul to let itself be carried there by love. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux. Subscribe if you wish to walk this little way and discover what Jesus truly asks of the soul that longs for heaven. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux believed that eternity does not begin after death. It begins the moment the soul entrusts itself completely to God. For her, longing for eternity was not about fear of judgment or obsession with perfection. It was about love, simple, trusting, childlike love. She wrote, "I do not die, I enter life." This sentence reveals everything. Eternity for Thérèse was not earned by heroic effort. It was entered by surrender. So what does Jesus ask from a soul who longs for eternity? Not extraordinary sacrifices, not flawless virtue, not spiritual achievements admired by others. Jesus asks for trust. Thérèse discovered that souls often misunderstand God. They imagine him as a demanding judge who measures progress, counts failures, and waits for perfection. But she insisted that Jesus is drawn not to strength, but to littleness, not to self-confidence, but to dependence. Picture a small child standing at the foot of a tall staircase. The child wants to reach the top but cannot climb alone. Instead of giving up, the child lifts her arms and looks to her father. Thérèse said that this is exactly what Jesus asks of souls who long for eternity. Do not climb. Let yourself be lifted. This changes everything. Longing for eternity does not mean exhausting yourself spiritually. It means allowing yourself to be loved. Saint Thérèse lived in the hidden rhythm of convent life, sweeping floors, enduring misunderstandings, praying in dryness, loving without recognition. Yet she believed she was already living for eternity because she lived in trust. Every small act, when offered with love, became an eternal act. She wrote, "It is not great deeds that please God, but great love." Souls who long for eternity often struggle with anxiety. Am I good enough? Am I faithful enough? Am I advancing fast enough? Thérèse answers these fears gently. Eternity is not reached by speed, but by surrender. Jesus does not ask you to prove your love. He asks you to place yourself in his arms. This is the beginning of the little way, the path Jesus revealed to Thérèse for every soul, especially the weakest. A path where eternity is not a distant reward, but a present relationship. In this journey of 9 blocks, we will uncover what Jesus truly asks, how he invites souls to trust, to become little, to love simply, and to live already with one foot in eternity, even while walking on earth. For now, pause and ask yourself softly, am I trying to reach eternity? Or am I allowing myself to be carried toward it? The answer opens everything. To understand what Jesus asks from souls who long for eternity, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux invites us to unlearn something first. The idea that eternity is achieved through accumulation, more prayers, more effort, more discipline, more visible holiness. Thérèse saw clearly that this way of thinking quietly exhausts the soul and turns the desire for heaven into a burden. She discovered that Jesus does not ask the soul to add more. He asks the soul to empty itself. Thérèse wrote, "What pleases Jesus is to see me love my littleness and my poverty." This is a radical statement. It means that Jesus is not waiting for you to become spiritually impressive. He is waiting for you to stop hiding your need. Souls who long for eternity often carry a hidden fear. What if I am not enough? This fear pushes them to strive, to compare, to measure their progress. But Thérèse teaches that comparison is incompatible with eternity. Heaven is not a competition. It is a home. Imagine a child who wants to be close to a parent. The child does not bring achievements. The child brings presence. The child climbs into the parent's lap and rests. Thérèse insisted that this resting posture is exactly what Jesus asks of the soul that longs for eternal life. Rest does not mean passivity, it means confidence. Jesus asks the soul to trust that he desires eternity with you more than you desire it with him. This is why Thérèse emphasized confidence over fear. She believed that fear distorts the image of God. It makes the soul cautious, tense, and distant. Confidence, on the other hand, opens the heart and allows love to flow freely. She wrote, "Perfect confidence is enough to make us advance rapidly in holiness." Notice her words, confidence, not perfection. Souls who long for eternity are often tempted to focus on their failures. They replay mistakes. They worry about consistency. They fear falling short at the final moment. Thérèse gently dismantles this anxiety by reminding us that eternity is not preserved by human effort, but by divine faithfulness. Jesus does not ask you to guarantee your salvation. He asks you to trust his mercy. Picture Thérèse walking through the convent garden, the gravel soft under her steps. She feels weak, limited, aware of her imperfections. Instead of discouragement, she lifts her heart and thinks, "I am too small to climb, but he is strong enough to lift me." This thought filled her with peace. Eternity, then, is not something you chase, it is something you receive. Jesus asks the soul to remain open, especially in weakness, to return to him quickly after every fall, to avoid discouragement, to choose hope again and again, to believe that love covers what effort cannot. This is deeply liberating. It means that longing for eternity does not require constant tension. It requires a steady turning of the heart toward Jesus, even when the heart feels poor. Thérèse teaches that the soul advances toward eternity not by being flawless, but by being faithful in trust. When Saint Thérèse of Lisieux speaks about what Jesus asks from souls who long for eternity, she always returns to one central truth. Love is the measure of everything. Not visible love, not dramatic love, but hidden, faithful love lived in the smallest details of daily life. Thérèse discovered that Jesus is not impressed by size. He is moved by intention. She wrote, "To pick up a pin for love can convert a soul." This simple sentence reveals her entire theology of eternity. For Thérèse, even the smallest act, when done with pure love, carries eternal weight. Souls who long for eternity often imagine that they must do something extraordinary to deserve it. They search for heroic sacrifices, intense spiritual experiences, or radical missions. But Thérèse insists that Jesus asks for something much more accessible and much more demanding in its simplicity: to love without being noticed. Imagine a quiet morning in the convent. The floor is cold, the corridors are still. A sister passes by without a word. Thérèse chooses to smile interiorly, to offer kindness silently, to accept the moment as it is. No one sees, no one applauds. Yet in heaven, this act shines. Why? Because love is never small in God's eyes. Jesus asks the soul to love in ways that are invisible to the world, to choose patience when irritation would be easier, to choose gentleness when defensiveness would feel justified, to choose silence when recognition is desired. These choices shape eternity far more than grand gestures. Thérèse believed that eternity is built in the present moment. Every act of love stretches the soul toward heaven. Every sacrifice offered without complaint widens the heart's capacity for God. She wrote, "I want to seek out a means of going to heaven by a little way, very straight, very short. That way is love lived in simplicity. This love does not require emotional intensity. It requires fidelity. Loving when you feel dry, loving when you feel tired, loving when no one understands, loving when love feels ordinary. Souls who long for eternity sometimes become discouraged when their love feels small. They think, if my love were real, it would feel stronger." But Thérèse teaches that love is proven not by feeling but by choice. When you choose love without consolation, your soul matures for eternity. Jesus asks you to love where you are, with what you have, in what feels insignificant. This is difficult precisely because it is hidden. There is no external reward, no visible result, no immediate satisfaction. Yet this hidden love forms the soul in the most profound way. Imagine eternity as a vast ocean of love. Each small act of charity is like a drop added to that ocean. Alone it seems insignificant, but together they shape a heart capable of eternal communion. Thérèse lived convinced that nothing offered with love is wasted. She believed that heaven is filled with small acts unnoticed on earth, but remembered by God. When Saint Thérèse of Lisieux speaks about humility, she does not describe it as humiliation, self-contempt, or spiritual insecurity. She presents humility as truth lived peacefully, the soul's calm acceptance of what it is before God. And this humility, she teaches, is something Jesus specifically asks of souls who long for eternity. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking less about yourself. Thérèse wrote, "Humility consists in recognizing one's nothingness and expecting everything from God." This sentence reveals why humility is essential for eternity. Heaven is not built on self-assertion, but on total dependence on divine love. Souls who long for eternity are often tempted to measure themselves. They evaluate their prayer life, their virtues, their consistency, their progress. But Jesus asks something far more freeing. Stop measuring and start trusting. Humility allows the soul to rest in truth without anxiety. Imagine a child who knows she cannot reach the table on her own. She does not feel ashamed of her height. She simply lifts her arms. That gesture is humility, not despair, confidence. Thérèse lived this interior posture constantly. She did not deny her limitations. She embraced them as invitations for God to act. Weakness did not discourage her. It delighted her child because it gave God space. She wrote, "The more one feels weak, without desires or virtues, the more suitable one is for the operations of this consuming and transforming love." Here humility becomes fertile ground. Where pride closes the soil, humility opens it. Jesus asks souls who long for eternity to stop pretending they are strong, to stop polishing their spiritual image, to stop fearing their limitations. Because eternity is not a place for the self-made, it is a home for the loved. Humility frees the soul from comparison. When you stop measuring yourself against others, you begin to live before God alone. Thérèse believed that comparison distorts love and feeds discouragement. Eternity, however, is not threatened by your smallness, it is nourished by it. Picture Thérèse in the infirmary, physically weak, misunderstood, unnoticed. She does not try to justify herself. She does not demand recognition. She simply remains, peaceful, trusting, small. And in that smallness, her soul grows vast. Humility also changes the way you approach failure. Instead of falling into despair or self-criticism, the humble soul returns quickly to God. Thérèse insisted that the speed of return matters more than the fall itself. What Jesus asks is not perfection, but confidence after failure. Failure accepted humbly becomes prayer. Weakness offered sincerely becomes love. Nothing surrendered to God is lost. Souls who long for eternity must learn to live without defending themselves before God. They must allow Him to see them as they are and to love them there. Humility is the door through which eternal love enters the heart. One of the most surprising truths Saint Thérèse of Lisieux reveals is this. Jesus asks souls who long for eternity to live fully in the present moment, not to escape it, not to rush through it, not to endure it impatiently while dreaming of heaven, but to love God here now, exactly where they are. Thérèse believed that eternity is not postponed until after death. It is quietly shaped in the ordinary moments of today. She wrote, "The present moment is a little flower that we can offer to Jesus." This is the heart of her spirituality. Jesus does not ask the soul to live in imagined futures or regretful pasts. He asks for attention, love, and surrender in the small reality placed before you now. Souls who long for eternity often struggle with impatience. They want progress. They want clarity. They want transformation. They want signs that they are advancing. But Thérèse teaches that impatience is a subtle refusal of the present moment, and therefore a refusal of God's will as it is being offered. Jesus asks the soul to stop negotiating with time. Imagine a person constantly saying, "When this difficulty ends, I will love better. When my prayer improves, I will be more faithful. When my life becomes clearer, I will give myself fully. Thérèse gently interrupts this mindset and says, love now. Love while waiting. Love while confused. Love while tired. Love while unseen. Because the present moment is the only place where love is possible. Picture Thérèse walking through the convent during a long, uneventful afternoon. Nothing extraordinary happens. No consolations. No insights. No recognition. Yet she chooses to love the moment as it is. She smiles interiorly. She accepts monotony. She offers her boredom. And in doing so, she transforms time into eternity. Jesus asks souls who long for eternity to stop searching for special moments and to sanctify ordinary ones. This requires surrender, to accept today as it is without resentment, to embrace duties without complaint, to trust that God is present even when nothing feels spiritual. Thérèse believed that God hides himself in the ordinary, that he waits for souls not in extraordinary experiences, but in daily tasks done with love. Eternity, then, is built quietly, one present moment at a time. Living in the present moment also protects the soul from discouragement. When you focus only on today, you are freed from the pressure of becoming someone else tomorrow. Jesus does not ask you to be perfect forever. He asks you to love now. This brings peace. The soul stops racing. The heart stops striving. Prayer becomes simple again. Life becomes lighter. Thérèse teaches that when the soul accepts the present moment with love, it enters a deep alignment with God's will, and God's will is always the doorway to eternity. So ask yourself gently, am I resisting the present moment? Am I postponing love? Am I waiting for a better time to give myself to God? Jesus is not waiting for a different version of your life. He is waiting for you, here, now, today. At the very center of Saint Thérèse of Lisieux's understanding of eternity stands one decisive truth. Jesus asks souls who long for eternity to trust his mercy more than their own faithfulness. This is not a comforting idea meant to excuse weakness. It is a spiritual law that Thérèse lived with absolute seriousness. She believed that the soul's greatest danger is not falling, but doubting God's mercy after the fall. Thérèse wrote with striking boldness, "Even if I had committed every sin possible, I would still have the same confidence, because I know that this multitude of offenses would be like a drop of water thrown into a blazing furnace." This sentence reveals the scale of her trust. Eternity for her was not secured by flawless consistency, but by radical confidence in divine mercy. Souls who long for eternity often become overly focused on their own fidelity. They examine themselves constantly. They measure progress. They fear inconsistency. They worry about perseverance. But Jesus asks something far more liberating. Place your confidence not in your strength, but in his heart. This changes the interior posture of the soul. Instead of saying, "Will I remain faithful?" the soul begins to say, "He is faithful." Instead of asking, "Will I endure?" the soul begins to trust, "He will sustain me." Thérèse understood that mercy is not a backup plan. It is the plan. Eternity is not reached by never falling, but by always returning with confidence. She insisted that discouragement after a fall is more dangerous than the fall itself, because it suggests that God's love is fragile. Imagine a child learning to walk. The child falls often, but the parent does not grow impatient. The parent smiles, opens arms, and encourages another step. The child's future does not depend on never falling. It depends on trusting the parent enough to keep trying. This is how Jesus looks at the soul. Thérèse lived in constant awareness of her poverty. She never trusted her resolutions. She trusted love. She trusted mercy. She trusted that Jesus delights more in a returning heart than in a perfect performance. She wrote, "It is confidence and nothing but confidence that must lead us to love." This confidence is what prepares the soul for eternity. Trusting mercy frees the soul from fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being rejected, fear of not lasting. When fear fades, love grows, and love is what eternity is made of. Jesus asks the soul to trust that mercy is stronger than weakness, that love is stronger than sin, that grace is stronger than inconsistency, and that his desire to save is greater than your desire to be saved. This trust does not lead to carelessness, it leads to peace, and peace allows love to mature. As Thérèse teaches, the soul that trusts mercy walks lightly. It does not carry the heavy burden of self-justification. It rests, it hopes, it loves. When Saint Thérèse of Lisieux speaks about suffering, she does not present it as something Jesus enjoys imposing, nor as a test designed to measure endurance. Instead, she reveals something far more intimate. Jesus asks souls who long for eternity to accept suffering as a place of union with his heart. For Thérèse, suffering was never sought, never dramatized, and never glorified. It was received, gently, honestly, and with trust. She understood that suffering, when accepted with love, becomes a language of intimacy between the soul and God. She wrote, "To suffer in peace, suffering gladly, is to give Jesus something he loves." Notice her precision. She does not say to suffer much, but to suffer in peace. Souls who long for eternity often struggle with suffering because they fear it means God is distant, displeased, or silent. But Thérèse teaches the opposite. Suffering is often the moment when God is closest, even if he feels hidden. Imagine a child sitting quietly beside a parent during a difficult moment. The child may not understand what is happening. There may be no words, but presence remains, love remains. That is how Thérèse lived suffering, as presence without explanation. She suffered physically through illness. She suffered emotionally through misunderstanding. She suffered spiritually through dryness and darkness of faith. Yet she refused to interpret suffering as abandonment. Instead, she chose love. Jesus asks the soul to accept suffering not with forced positivity, but with trustful surrender. To say inwardly, "I do not understand, but I remain. I do not feel, but I trust. I cannot see, but I stay close." This is a profound spiritual maturity. Suffering accepted with love enlarges the soul's capacity for eternity. It stretches the heart beyond comfort. It teaches dependence, it purifies intention, and above all, it anchors the soul in Christ's own experience of love, offered in silence. Thérèse believed that suffering becomes destructive only when it is resisted with bitterness or fear. When embraced with confidence, it becomes transformative, not because pain is good, but because love is stronger. She wrote, "I choose all that Jesus wills." This was not resignation, it was trust. Souls who long for eternity are not asked to seek suffering, but when it comes, they are invited to remain open rather than hardened, to allow suffering to soften the heart instead of closing it. Suffering teaches the soul to stop clinging to earthly consolations. It gently loosens attachments. It reminds the soul that its true home is not here, and yet it also teaches how to love deeply here. This paradox lies at the heart of eternity, to love fully in a world that cannot fully satisfy. Thérèse accepted suffering because she knew it aligned her heart with Jesus, not through pain itself, but through trust within pain. She believed that every moment of suffering accepted with love becomes an eternal offering. One of the most delicate teachings Saint Thérèse of Lisieux offers is this: Jesus asks souls who long for eternity to remain faithful even when they feel nothing, not when prayer is sweet, not when God feels near, but precisely when everything feels dry, empty, and silent. Thérèse called this loving without consolation, and she believed it was one of the purest forms of love a soul can offer. She wrote, "I have never felt less courage, yet never have I felt so loved." This sentence captures the mystery. Spiritual dryness does not mean God has withdrawn. It often means he is inviting the soul to love him without reward. Souls who long for eternity are often surprised by dryness. They expect that deeper faith will bring deeper feelings. But Thérèse teaches the opposite. As love matures, it becomes quieter, simpler, and less dependent on emotion. Dryness strips prayer of self-interest. It removes spiritual pleasure. It purifies intention. When prayer feels empty, the soul is tempted to withdraw, to reduce prayer, or to assume something is wrong. But Jesus asks the soul to remain, not because it feels good, but because it is love. Imagine sitting with someone you love deeply during a moment of silence. No words, no excitement, no reassurance, just presence. Remaining there is not exciting, but it is faithful. This is how Thérèse lived her final years. Her prayer felt dark, heaven felt distant, faith felt fragile. Yet she refused to leave. She wrote, "I choose to remain at my post even in the night." This fidelity delights Jesus. Why? Because it mirrors his own love, offered on the cross without consolation. Jesus asks the soul to trust that love does not disappear when feelings disappear. He asks the soul to believe that faithfulness itself is prayer, that remaining is loving, that staying is enough. Thérèse teaches that dryness prepares the soul for eternity because eternity is not built on feelings, but on union. And union deepens when the soul learns to love without reward. In dryness, the soul learns humility. In silence, it learns trust. In emptiness, it learns surrender. Thérèse never tried to escape dryness. She did not dramatize it or despair over it. She accepted it as a quiet sharing in Christ's hidden life. She believed that Jesus smiles upon the soul that continues to love him when there is no emotional return. This is a demanding love, but a gentle one. Souls who long for eternity must learn this lesson. God is not felt, but he is faithful, and he asks the same fidelity in return. Remaining faithful in dryness forms the soul into something stable, peaceful, and free. Free from emotional dependency, free from fear, free from the need to feel holy in order to love. Thérèse believed that in heaven, the soul will finally understand the value of every moment of dryness accepted with love. Nothing will have been wasted, nothing will have been ignored. Every silent act of fidelity will shine. After walking through trust, love, humility, the present moment, mercy, suffering, and fidelity in dryness, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux brings everything to a single, luminous conclusion. When all explanations fall away, when fear dissolves, when effort grows quiet, we finally see what Jesus truly asks of souls who long for eternity. He asks one thing: that they allow themselves to be loved. This is the heart of Thérèse's message. Eternity is not reserved for the strong, the flawless, or the spiritually impressive. It is prepared for souls who stop resisting love, souls who stop proving, souls who stop managing their holiness, and instead rest. Thérèse wrote with disarming simplicity, "All that he asks of you is to accept his love, not to earn it, not to justify it, not to improve yourself enough to deserve it, to accept it." Souls who long for eternity often carry a subtle tension, a sense that something more is required, something still lacking. Thérèse gently removes this tension. She teaches that eternity begins the moment the soul consents to be loved as it is, not as it wishes to be. Jesus does not ask for heroic strength. He asks for openness. He does not ask for spiritual brilliance. He asks for trust. He does not ask for perfection. He asks for surrender. Imagine a small child finally falling asleep in a parent's arms after resisting for hours. The child does nothing to deserve the rest. The rest is given. The only requirement is letting go. This is how Thérèse understood eternity. She believed that God is infinitely more eager to give himself than the soul is to receive him. The only obstacle is resistance, the subtle refusal to be small, to be dependent, to be loved without control. When the soul abandons self-reliance, fear, comparison, and effort, something astonishing happens. Life becomes lighter, faith becomes simpler, prayer becomes quieter, love becomes natural. Eternity no longer feels distant. It feels near, it feels familiar, it feels like home. Thérèse lived her final days without spiritual consolation, without visible success, without dramatic signs. Yet she was certain of one thing: she was loved, and that certainty was enough. She once said, "I am not afraid of God. I love him." This sentence summarizes everything. Jesus asks souls who long for eternity to live from this place, not from fear of judgment, but from confidence in love. Not from anxiety about the future, but from surrender in the present. Not from self-effort, but from trust. And when the soul finally rests there, Eternity has already begun. Not after death, not after perfection, but now. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux shows us that the door to eternity is not narrow because it is demanding. It is narrow because it is simple. And simplicity requires humility, trust, childlike love. To long for eternity, then, is not to reach higher, but to become smaller. And Jesus, bending low, does the rest.